Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2025 Sony Open initial research show. It is great to have golf back, and we are starting 2025 off on a fantastic foot. That's right. We have a shout out to give. Congratulations to Phil, who let me know in the comments of Wednesday's show that he was a big winner on Thursday's showdown, thanks to the suggestion of Sepp Straka. So congratulations, Phil, on your hit to start 2025. And as always, if you had success, please let me know in chat or in the comments. Would love to be able to shout out other members of the community who have success. It doesn't have to be around golf. If you are a fantasy football champion, if you are playing fantasy NBA, fantasy hockey, anything to that effect, please, if you are a part of the community, feel free to put it in chat, put it in the comments. I will shout you out every week. But congratulations again, Phil, on your hit. Was pretty close myself to cashing on a few things. Couldn't quite get Sepp Straka across the finish line for top European. I know longtime viewer Darnell had a placement wager on Sepp Straka that didn't quite come through. But overall, it was a fantastic week. It was a good way to start 2025, and we're going to try to keep the momentum as we stay in Hawaii for the Sony Open. So let's get into it, shall we? All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytic tool out there for your money. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description to the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where every Monday I post research regarding that week's tournament, some course information, prior winners, patterns of those prior winners, and people and players in the field this week and that week in general, who also fit the pattern of former champions. So if you want to see the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and top player usage in the DFS contests I play. If you follow me over there, you would have seen the Sepp Straka top European, which almost came through. You would also seen the JT Poston outright, which was nowhere close. You would have seen all the JT Poston I played, the Xander, who came alive a little bit after Thursday, the good plays, the bad plays. So if you want to follow along there and see what I'm doing week in and week out for the PGA Tour, give me a follow over at X. And then lastly, for this, for at least for social media, Gabe's handle is in the description. He writes a great article called The Fringe that came back today, first full week and first full field event on the PGA Tour. So Gabe continued writing his articles and sent that out today. You really are missing out if you are not subscribed to it. It is free to do, so make sure you're doing that, and go show him some support, follow him on social media. Lastly, for this intro, we are live. Chat is open in addition to any success that you had for the century, which I want to hear about. Moving forward to the Sony, is Hideki your favorite? Coming off the win at Kapalua, do you think he makes it the Hawaiian double? What kind of players do you think play best at Waialae? Any and everything that you want to discuss for this week in Oahu as we move to another island, but another pristine tournament for the PGA Tour. So let's do our initial research for the 2025 Sony Open. And we start, as we always do, on a Sunday evening over at the GCSAA Tournament Fact Sheet. As I mentioned, we are at Waialae Country Club. This course has hosted this event since its inception. It's been called a couple of different things. I believe originally it was just the Hawaiian Open, a couple other title sponsors. Sony took it over right around 2000. I'm not exactly sure when, but it's been a long-standing event on the PGA Tour. The most notable image from Waialae is the W pine trees standing behind the 16th green. That is this course. As I mentioned, we are at Waialae Country Club in Honolulu, Hawaii. This is originally a Seth Rayner design, so again, no architect filter to mess with in Fantasy National. It has been renovated as recently as mid-2010s. Tom Doak, Robert Trent Jones has had his hands on this. The key difference between Waialae, there's several key differences, but two big key differences between Waialae and Kapalua. Kapalua was very, very hilly, very undulating, going up and down the mountain. This is very, very flat. There's only about 10 feet of elevation change on the entirety of the golf course. It's a very, very flat course, so golfers and especially caddies are relieved to have an easier walk after what is the daunting task of Kapalua. Waialae is, and the other distinct difference between Waialae and Kapalua, Waialae is a very short par 70, just over 7,000 yards. This is short by PGA standards. Short par 70, 4 par 3s, 2 par 5s. Pardon me as I get this camera centered just a little bit. We are on Bermuda greens again. Now, you see here the GCSAA doesn't specifically list the typing. Thanks to Gabe here, and the credit absolutely goes to Gabe. Gabe was able to find that these greens are TIFF Dwarf Bermuda. So not the exact same subtype from last week when we were on TIFF Eagle at Kapalua, but we're still going to be looking at Bermuda greens in terms of putting. And we are on Bermuda throughout the entirety of the course. Now, Gabe only mentioned the greens, so I do not know the specific subtype in terms of fairway, rough, but you see here it is all Bermuda throughout the course. The greens, although not as large as Kapalua, they are still large, 7,100 square feet. Those are pretty darn large by PGA Tour standards. The average green size on the PGA Tour is right about 6,000 square feet. Honestly, it's a little bit less. I just round to make nice, easy whole numbers. A little bit of fairway here. These fairways are actually pretty wide, but they just seem narrow coming from the football field size fairways of Kapalua. These are still pretty darn wide fairways. No note on average length, or average width. But these are fairly wide. They will play smaller. They are tree lined, especially on a few holes. There are a couple of very, very sharp dog legs that really narrow the playing area of the fairways. A lot of rough here, a few bunkers, 5 holes with water in play around Waialae, which is, again, different than Kapalua, which had 0. So there's a look at Waialae in terms of a GCSA tournament fact sheet. It is very short. I can't say very short. It is a short par 70. We are on TIFF Dwarf Bermuda greens. And I believe that's the only course that I know of that specifically lists or has TIFF Dwarf. I see Mini Verde Ultra Dwarf. I'm not an agronomist. I couldn't tell you the differences between the subtypes. This is the only course I know of that is TIFF Dwarf. But we are on Bermuda greens, no architect filter, but about as different as you can get of a course from Kapalua. This is very flat, short, lots of dog legs, severe dog legs on a couple of holes. But nonetheless, another very, very solid tournament and a lot of pristine viewing considering the weather that Hawaii is having and contrasted with what I imagine most of the country is having, but especially here where we got a foot of snow today. So, all right, with that, we're going to move to Fantasy National and the players in the field this week. Of course, with the Century just having wrapped up maybe 30 minutes ago, maybe an hour ago now. No Century stats are in from Fantasy National. That'll be in tomorrow. But we'll take a look at some of the players in the field, at least so far, who have committed to playing the Sony. I'm going to be honest, I have not checked to see if there's been any field changes yet. So there very well might be. I will make sure I check that tomorrow. But in the field this week, we have several key players. A lot of players that were playing at the Century. Russell Henley, McNeely, Horschel, Connors, Davis Thompson, Hideki, Taylor Pendrith, Siwoo Kim, Sahith Theegala, Seabass, Brian Harmon, somebody I was pretty high on who did not, he finished DFL. So that was one of the bad suggestions I had for last week. But a lot of Harry Hall, several players playing or that have played in the Century are teaming up right back again for the Sony, which is making this a very strong field, at least compared to years prior. Very rarely did many players that played in the Century tee it up in the Sony. So it's great to see that more of these premier PGA players teeing up in non-signature events. Of course, I mentioned Hideki going for the Hawaiian double. But there's a look at your top performers, total performers from 2024 that have committed so far. Before we go to let's go ahead and just go to the course breakdown in Fantasy National. Take a look at YLI from a scorecard and graphical view. If I zoom in, does that help viewing a little bit? Maybe. Yeah, it cuts off the axis here, or what the specific numbers are. Okay. Scorecard view here of YLI. Much like Kapalua, YLI starts off pretty strong with the third and fourth most difficult holes. But what you need to know about YLI is the two par fives are very short, very, very, very easy. Two of the easiest par fives on the PGA Tour. The par 5 ninth, only at 506. You see it plays to 2/3 of a shot under par. Yields an eagle at 7%. That is an astronomical rate. And the par 5 18th plays to a half a shot under par. Doesn't yield as many eagles, but definitely a great scoring opportunity. And there are several holes at YLI that are very short, like Kapalua. The difference is they're going to play to their true yardage since this course is very, very flat. So as we see, we can take a look, even though it is difficult, short par 4, 423, 422, 351, 440, 430, 398, 417. Overall, you do have one extremely difficult hole at YLI. The par 4 13th plays to a quarter of a shot over par. Not a whole lot of doubles per se, just a very, very bogeyable hole. The par 3s, fairly long with the exception of the short 176. So you got 204, 194, and 194. Again, the par 5s are extremely short. A lot of shorter par 4s. Pretty good scoring opportunities around the Sony. The Sony generally tends to be in the upper teens. If the wind is down, can get into the 20s. And if we cheat and take a sneak peek at the historic conditions, you can see, one round of average last year and then 3 rounds of easy, a couple rounds of average, mostly easy. Again, if the wind picks up, it will be difficult. I mean, we're talking, 20, 25 mile an hour sustained winds. Haven't looked at Wind Finder. We'll start doing that tomorrow. If the wind is high, then the course can get challenging because it is exposed being on the coast. But as of right now, we're just going to assume that it's going to be pretty easy with average amounts of wind. Moving to a graphical view, we're looking at strokes gained by shot type. Much like Kapalua, putting is the name of the game here at the Sony. Yes, you're going to have to hit your iron shots pretty well. Fairly normal distribution between off the tee and around the green, but even your top 10s, not just your winners, but your top 10s are putting well. Your top 5s, that discrepancy grows even more between putting and approach. And then, of course, for your winners, you would expect putting would be a big spike, averaging 1.5 per round. So the winners are averaging about gaining 6 per tournament here at YLI. Off the tee is a little bit for the winners, making sure they are either so long that they're just cutting the dog legs, or that they are accurate enough to position themselves well to attack these holes. You've seen a wide variety of winners here. Justin Thomas absolutely bombed his way to winning here. You've also had short game specialists like Kevin Na win. So no one particular way to get it done around here. The common factor being that you are putting very, very well that week. We move to strokes gained by hole by par. Even though there's only 2 par 5s, you see that's where majority of the strokes gained are being are happening for these professionals. Just taking advantage of those 2 very easy par 5s. Same for our top 5s, and then for the winners, par 4s they're playing fairly well, and you're going to have to. I am shocked that these par 3s aren't contributing more, but they just aren't. This par 3 17th plays a few hundredths over. The par 3 11th plays to a tenth of a shot over par. Par 3 7th plays a few hundredths under par. 1/10 over. Generally speaking, these par 3s, you just try to play them in par. If you sneak a birdie, great. You're going to have many other scoring opportunities around the golf course that you just try to get your pars on the par 3s and move on. Moving towards hole composition, as I was mentioning, there's a plethora of par 4s, shorter par 4s here at YLI, but the par 3s, 3 of them from 175 to 200. Now, this is a little bit misleading as 2 of those par 3s are at 194, so it would not surprise you to see them be pushed over 200 yards, a couple of days or whatnot. And then the one at 204. 2 short par 4s, not drivable per se. You do have the 398 and a 351. Only under the, absolute perfect conditions, downwind, long hitter, is it drivable. Otherwise, 2 very short par 4s. And then the rest of the par 4s are evenly split between 400 and 500 yards on either side of 450. So it'll be interesting to see once we go to the data dive tomorrow night where majority of the strokes gained go in terms of par 3s, 4s, and 5s. My assumption is the par 3s will be in the 175 to 200, but I'll be interested to see what it does with the par 4s. And then the par 5s, one very short at 504, and then the other one at 551. You can see the 551 coming under 550, and perhaps we just look at 500 to 550 par 5s as well. Approach shot distribution, nice to have this chart back and populating in Fantasy National. Majority of the approach shots, even though this is a short course, look at the amount of approach shots that come from 120 or from 150 to 200. This is, again, due to the sharp dog legs and somewhat positional style layout that YLI provides and forces. So at least in terms of against the tour average, majority of our approach shots coming from 150 to 200, mostly from 150 to 175. So driver not necessary around YLI. But again, if players are really feeling it, like Justin Thomas, they can overpower this course if they are playing very, very well. Historic cut line got very, very easy a couple years ago at -4. It's been as high as +4. I would imagine the conditions were pretty tough. In 2020, the 2 rounds of the 2 rounds of difficult that we saw a moment ago back here, 2020, when the wind was really, really going. The cut line was +2. Generally speaking, though, you're looking at about -1, anywhere from even to -2 on average, roughly about -1. This is an easy tournament, but not Kapalua levels. You're not going to get your 36 unders or whatever Hideki finished up at. You're going to get right around in your low teens, and then the winners, like I mentioned, around 20 under. Pretty good score here. And you see that with the scoring distribution, 20% birdies, 14.5% bogeys. Generally leads to more Wildlife leads more birdies than bogeys, which therefore is easier. Driving accuracy, not very high here. Players aren't afraid to be in the rough. It's kept 3 inches, which is average. They've actually grown it the past few years. It used to be pretty short, maybe average. And then starting in 2022, they've let it grow, and it's become long. So players aren't necessarily afraid to be in the rough. These greens are pretty big, so even if a player is in the rough, they're generally adept enough to hit these greens, or the greens are easy enough to hit from the rough. So, not terribly worried about that. Greens a little bit higher here. Scrambling is easier here. 3 putts per round are down here. These greens aren't overly complicated. You see the distance actually is a little bit higher than the average tour event. Again, leading to the fact that players just aren't afraid to be in the rough here, despite some positional holes, for what the architect would have deemed forced layups. Guys are generally hitting driver here, but you don't have to. And then proximity, right around the tour average. So there's a look at Wildlife from a scorecard and graphical view. We'll move back to Fantasy National. A couple of kind of big picture views here. Again, until we see the forecast, which will start tomorrow, let's take a look at easy. When rounds are easy relative to par, or at least when rounds were easy relative to par last year in 2024, your top performers in the field this week for the Sony: Davis Thompson, Harry Hall, who had a very, very good century. Ryo Hitsatsune, Luke Clanton is in the field. Ben Griffin, Chan Kim, Lucas Glover, JT Poston, Doug Gim, and Taylor Pendrith. And then if we check short courses, absolutely. With this barely stretching over 7,000 yards, definitely appropriate to look at short courses. So in 2024, your top performers on short courses: Michael Kim, Ben Griffin, Keith Mitchell, Tom Kim, JT Poston, Seabez, Eric Cole, Ryo Hitsatsune, Austin Eckroat, and Luke Clanton. All right. Let's just go ahead and go to the tournament history or strokes gained total page view here in Fantasy National. Take a look at the players who have played the best around Waialae the past 5 years or so. You see that strokes gained total leader is Russell Henley. No wins, got beat out by Hideki 3 years ago, but top 15, a couple of top 5s, and that aforementioned runner-up played very well here. Hideki is a former champion at Waialae, winning 3 years ago. He's played pretty darn well here. Past couple of years been pretty middling, but does have a win. Chris Kirk is a former champion here long time ago, I believe, but runner-up 4 years ago, another top 5, another top 20. He's played well. Nick Taylor, Cam Davis, Ryan Palmer, Corey Connors, Siwoo Keegan. Keegan's been literal boom or bust, all or nothing. You see a runner-up last year, got beat in a playoff. Our defending champion, unfortunately, passed away last year, Grayson Murray. He is the defending champion. He wins last year. but Murray beat Bradley and Ben on in a playoff. But going back to Keegan, 2 top 15s, a runner-up, and then missed cuts surrounding those. Ben on's played well in a couple tries. So there's a look at the players who have played really well around Waialae. Players who haven't played well. Rafael Campos hasn't played in a few years, but 0 for 2, at least in the past 5 years. Adam Shank, 1 for 4. Mark Hubbard, 3 for 5. Lashley has a top 10 and literally nothing else. Justin Lowers, 2 for 2 in making the cut, but has been very poor. Max McGreevy, David Skins, Gary Woodland, 0 for 2. JJ Spawn, a top 15 and missed cuts everywhere else. Carson Young, Alex Smalley, 0 for 3. Matty Schmidt, 0 for 2. Vajegas, Chan Kim, 0 for 2. So here's a look at the players who have not played well around Waialae. All right, we're going to finish the show off going to the early look file. This is that same strokes gained total page view we just looked at. Just looking at where these players have accrued their strokes gained, their metrics around Waialae. We're going to filter out anybody who's only played it once. I want to see the players who have played it, multiple years, who plays this course consistently, what they've been doing well. You have off the tee here been fairly strong. Nothing astronomical. You see Cam Davis, 5 for 5 in the past 5 years. He's gaining 3 off the tee. Whereas, players like Ben On and Aaron Baddeley, Harry Hall even, are gaining, upwards of 6. But what you're not seeing here in off the tee is a big negative. Players are generally gaining on the field off the tee if they're performing well at Waialae. So it'll be interesting to note moving forward this week just how much we want to look at off the tee, or maybe a specific part of off the tee, whether that's fairways, whether that's distance. But if we look at the players who have averaged, top 35 or better, this is 20 players. That's quite a bit. Something else that Gabe noted in his article is that Waialae's been rather predictive. Players who have had success at Waialae generally tend to have success at Waialae, so quite interesting. This is a 1.1, so pretty solid. Approach 1.0, so in fact off the tee for these players who have averaged a top 35, off the tee is more than the approach. Very rare that you see that. Around the green, not a big factor at all. These greens are massive. I can't say massive. They're large. So around the green, generally not that big a deal. And then, of course, if players are performing well, they're generally putting well. This is an average of a 2.5. So, more than double off the tee and approach. So putting a big deal. Moving across to distance and fairways, greens. Distance can help. You see Ben On, who's been very good here. Patrick Rogers has been very good here. Cam Davis, 5 for 5. Where'd he go? Positive in distance. He absolutely destroys the golf ball off the tee. But you don't have to have it. Taylor Montgomery's been very good here. He's not long. Aaron Baddeley, one of the shortest hitters on the PGA Tour, has had some success here. You don't have to have distance. Fairways, there's a little bit here, I suppose. 1.2. Good drives. Good drives is something, because until you get to Patrick Rogers, most of these guys are field average or better. So good drives gained might be the early lean this week. And I think that's the way Gabe was looking at it as well. But pretty decent consistency here in good drives. Greens, which is a part of good drives, so I don't hate that one. Looking at scoring, you got to get your birdies, because there will be a few bogeys around YLI, but you're going to have to get your birdies. You got to go low here to contend. So we'll probably be looking at birdies or better, because there are a couple of decent eagle opportunities. Bogey avoidance has been pretty consistent, but you notice there's a player or two that has been negative in bogey avoidance. Not a single player negative in birdies gained in those average top 35s. Moving to par 3s, 4s, and 5s. Par 3s, again, they didn't really look like they added much. And they haven't added much for the players who continuously play well here. This is a 0.8. And contrast that with these par 4s. My goodness, this is a 3.5. 4 times the importance. 4.5 times the importance. Par 4 is just a massive deal around YLI, which makes sense because there's 12 of them. And then the par 5s, yes, they're off your screen, but this is a 0.9. So a lot of emphasis in these par 4s. And as you can see, they've generally been a mixed bag between these two, which is where majority of them fall. And then very quickly, we'll take a look at proximity. Again, these two ranges were the most prevalent. At a glance, it would seem like the 175 to 200. This is 14 and a half. This is 7. Total procs might be something. Since these greens are big, maybe total procs is something. Interesting to note. We'll dig into more of that tomorrow come the data dive. And then, of course, for the data dive, we'll take a look at the winner matrix that I have here. We'll take a look at the form of some previous champions and whatnot. But a little bit of a shorter show, but, we're just taking our first look at YLI. But, again, congratulations to Phil for your big hit in Thursday's showdown. Tailing or taking the advice of Sepp Straka. Some good advice this week, some bad advice. I had some good plays, some bad plays, which is normal for any week. Not disappointed with my week by any stretch of the imagination. I was wrong on Kevin Yu. I thought he would perform well. Last I saw, he was not putting well, which he had to do, which was the worry. I was really high on Harry Hall. Was really high on Thomas Dietrich, who played extremely well. But then again, I was down on Cam Davis, and he played very well. I was down on Hideki, and so little good, little bad. But it's great to get back into the swing of things for 2025, and we're going to try to continue the momentum this week for the Sony. So thanks for tuning in, watching, listening, supporting the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. I always appreciate it. Love what I do, taking a very in-depth look at golf statistics, giving you a statistician and data analyst's view of what he sees, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. Some weeks better than others. Sounds like we've started off on a good foot, and we're going to try to keep the momentum. So thanks again for all the support, for all the wagers you made this past week for the Century, for all the DFS contests you played this past week for the Century, and until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive Show, may all your bets be profitable.